Go ahead.
Welcome to today's episode of the Daily Thread. So happy to have you all here, and we have some news stories for you. Thanks for tuning in. Okay,
Mhm.
first thing, we didn't really get to speak about this the other day because it happened after we spoke, but Donald Trump has been indicted for the second time.
Right.
He is
Okay.
facing up to 410 years in prison if convicted.
Well,
Now,
that's the most ridiculous way. I know that's a big part of every way the news is delivered about that the guy is facing 100 years in prison or 200 years in prison. That's a ridiculous thing to say. Newscasters, broadcasters say that when they're talking to idiots. So you have to assume they think everybody is dopey that they're talking to when they say that a guy for having some papers in his property that he may have been entitled to because he was president of the United States could potentially get 400 years in prison.
I
It's
heard I heard Ben Shapiro say it the other day on his show. He said that it's pretty serious that Donald Trump could end up dying in prison if he's convicted of these
yeah,
charges, and I think that it's not something he would. He played out a scenario, and he said
yeah,
he wouldn't put his money against it. And the scenario that Ben Shapiro played out is: imagine Donald Trump is convicted, he's put in prison, but someone who's in
yeah.
prison can still be on the ballot and can still win the presidency. And then
That's right. That's right.
imagine he wins the presidency, and on the
Hmm.
first day of his presidency, he pardons himself.
That's right. He could do that. Absolutely, he could do that.
How crazy! You can't write a movie plot that crazy. How
We
crazy
are
would it be?
we are living in absolutely. It's historical, but it's also crazy times that we're living in. I got to tell you. I mean, you're always going to remember this. This is the fact of the matter is you have to reduce it to what it's really about. First of all, he has two other cases pending against him. Okay, the Alvin Bragg case in Manhattan for paying off people that he thought had information about him that could damage his presidency, which he was indicted for, and a second case from the Attorney General, Letitia James, who's saying that in order to get money from the banks years ago, he exaggerated or inflated the amount of the value of his properties. Those two cases they announced this morning are being put on hold. Those two cases are putting on hold. Now, if you had a strong, now, why? Because they want the federal case, which they think they have a strong case. Not so much about keeping the papers, but they think they have a case of obstruction of justice. Way before you were born, along for 20 years before you were born, there was Richard Nixon who resigned from the presidency. And, there was a campaign, there was a break in at the Watergate Hotel. I'm sure you heard about Watergate, right? And I'm sure you have no idea what it's about. Nobody around today has any idea what Watergate's just the name of a hotel in Washington, D.C., where some people working on the Nixon campaign broke into. Anyway, they didn't convict anybody of that. They didn't convict anybody of anything. Well, they did, but they went to jail because of obstruction of justice. That means that when the FBI comes to talk to you, you either don't talk to them at all or you tell them the truth. If you try to lie to federal officials, to the FBI, then you have committed a new crime. What they came to talk to you about, forget about it. It's not important.
The double standard here obviously is that um, the DOJ is going after Donald Trump, who is the DOJ really works for President Biden. Although they like to say that they are independent, they are not independent. They work for the president. The DOJ, who is working for President Biden, are trying to convict the number one competition for
Competition. Yeah,
opposition of
exactly,
in
exactly.
this upcoming election. So I know that the press secretary of the White House said that Joe Biden had nothing to do with this. His hands are squeaky clean. He's not involved. That
No,
doesn't
this
make much
this is what
sense.
this is what happens in Russia. If someone thinks they're going to run against Vladimir Putin, somehow they end up dead, and they can't run. That's what happens in Russia, and that's what happens in Syria, and that's what happens in Venezuela, and that's what happens in North Korea. If you have even a thought that you're going to get into one of these elections where you might be able to, get votes to win, which the concept doesn't exist in those countries that I named, somehow you end up dead. So this doesn't happen in America. Hopefully, we're not heading in that direction. But they're trying to get as close to that as possible. Anyway,
Yeah,
yeah, I know
and
you're invited. You're invited to an event on July 10th
yes,
featuring Donald Trump. We're all going to be there. The Israel Heritage Foundation. is sponsoring an event where Donald Trump's his country club in Bedminster, New Jersey. I'm sure you looked it up already on your ways to see how far it
Hopefully
is.
hopefully he's not coming with like an ankle bracelet or handcuffs.
I don't think so. That's another thing. They want to speed up the trial because they want to really do damage. They want a conviction before the election, so you can get up there on the stage, even if he's not sentenced to jail time, which is unlikely. Yeah, 400 years in jail. I bet you even if he gets convicted on all 37 counts, he doesn't serve 1 day in jail probably.
You want to put your money on that? Because I'm pretty sure
Yeah,
that your record
no.
so far is not so good when it comes to these things. You said that Ron DeSantis wasn't going to run for president, and he is running for president.
Well, he's in a primary right now. We'll see if he wins the primary. Then
Something else, something else that I noticed is after Trump was arrested in the Miami courthouse, Miami's mayor Francis Suarez, um, he launched paperwork to launch his bid for the Republican presidential nomination. He then, jumped in front of cameras and he backed Donald Trump and said that he needs to be freed from prison. These charges need to be dropped, and he started a whole truth campaign that the truth must come out. Um,
Well, by the way, Suarez is under investigation by the FBI for fraud. So
isn't that something?
if you look at it with this morning's Wall Street Journal has that story. So I guess if you get into trouble, let's say you're running a Ponzi scheme. See the story about the Ponzi schemes in Lakewood that's circulating online. There's like 5 simultaneous Ponzi schemes going on. No names, just a lot of
Unfortunate.
money. Just a lot of
Uh,
money, a lot of money going down the drain. But if those people would announce that they're running for president of the United States, maybe the media would be distracted and wouldn't report about the Ponzi scheme so much.
well, you know
But
what? The double standard here is that the same DOJ said that when Hillary Clinton was running for president, that they're not gonna pursue charges because they don't want to meddle in a presidential election. That okay, there's stuff here. There's what to look at. There's what 60,000 emails deleted, but we are not going to meddle in a presidential election, so we are not going to go ahead and try
yeah,
convicting her.
but that was then, and this is now, and that is not a defense. I know you can think I'm crazy changing the subject extremely, but Brandon Nimmo last night when he tried to get back to second base, he was really safe.
I think
He
so
his
too. By the way,
his
I think
his
that
hand
was
hit the
crazy.
bag. His hand hit the bag before he was tagged out. But
What good? Yeah, no. What good
but
is
the
is
umpire said he's out.
what's with that? What good is the replay in Major League Baseball if they're gonna replay it and still get it wrong?
Because when it comes down to it, it's still a human being's opinion of what he saw on the replay.
I
I
know,
saw a
but let me tell
replay.
you something, Abba. Me, you, all the ESPN analysts, and probably 15,000 people in the crowd thought he was safe after seeing the replay. But two guys thought he was out, so they called him out. I
So
think
what do you
it's I
think?
think
You think they're working for the DOJ? You think they're corrupt also?
Hey, listen, I'm not making any allegations against them, but listen, the Mets pulled out a win in the Subway Series. I think the Subway Series is something that is extremely, extremely Jewish. No,
Yes,
it's
it is.
something that I
Yes.
think back to my days in yeshiva when the Mets would play
Mhm.
the Yankees. It was some of the most hostile days in yeshiva. Coming to school the next day, if the Mets won, if you're a Met fan, you were on cloud nine, and if you were a Met fan and the Mets lost, or if you're a Yankee fan and the Yankees lost, you were trying to hide from everybody.
You
It is
know,
brutal.
I always find that I've written about this in the past many years ago that there's a divide in the from community between Mets fans and Yankee fans.
Yeah.
The more Hasidic people are Yankee fans, and the
Okay.
more modern Orthodox are Met fans. And
Really?
yeah, I think so. I think so.
Why?
You go into Borough Park or Williamsburg, you're not going to find too many Met fans. You find a lot
Because
of Yankee
no,
fans.
I can answer you because I don't think in the Hasidic community they're necessarily baseball fans. But
They're baseball. They're baseball fans,
if they're gonna wear a baseball hat, they're not gonna wear a Mets cap. It's like they're not
right?
gonna be a loser. They're gonna wear a Yankees hat
Right.
because Yankees are
Right.
winners. Who's gonna wear a
If
Mets
you
hat voluntarily? You need to be a big fan to wear a Mets hat.
if you go on the F train, you have a beard and paste, but you don't want anyone to know you're Jewish. You put on a Yankee hat,
But why
and
why
no one could tell. And no one
you
could
know
tell. Why is
why?
it like that? You know why? I'll tell you why. Because the history of the Hasidic community is from Europe, deep roots in Europe, and a lot of persecution, and a lot of families were damaged, were hurt and lost during the Holocaust. So when they came to this country after World War II, they wanted to identify with something that smacked. a victory. They needed a victory, and the Yankees were champions. So they became Yankee fans, so they could, at least in their spare time, if they had spare time, they could attach themselves to something of a winning and of a happy and a celebratory
I
and a
remember
victorious nation.
I
The
remember
Mets,
you
on the
saying
other
this
hand,
theory. I remember you
yes,
saying
the
this
Mets are,
theory. I had a different theory. My theory is sort of like this. You show me a redhead, and that redhead is a Mets fan. I'm yet to meet a redhead that is a Yankees fan. I've never
well,
met a
what's that?
redhead
Oh, you're a redhead. What does it? What does that have to do with anything? What does the color of your hair have
that
to do
we're
with the
talking about
Mets or the Yankees?
we're talking about stereotypes of what type of people go for what type of team, and
What's the
genetics are
connection?
involved.
What's
I
the
don't know.
connection between the redheads
Well,
and the
maybe
Mets?
The Mets logo is
Oh,
orange. You
oh,
know,
oh, orange and blue.
maybe that has something to
Okay,
do with it.
as long as we're talking about
I
baseball,
I have another.
how come the name of the Yankee players are not on the back of their uniforms? They're the only team in the major leagues that don't have the names on the back of the uniform.
Well, I think originally the entire American League didn't have names, but I think the tradition of the Yankees is that the name on the back is not important; it's the name on the front. You play for the name on the front, not on the name on the back. I think that was the tradition. I know back, you know, if we go back to the 1980s when I was just born. I'm joking. I was not born in the 80s.
Just
My father was
born,
born.
yeah.
My
I
father was
was
born in
born.
the 80s.
I was born in the '80s.
Um,
Yeah, you were born in the
but
'90s.
the famous story of Miracle on Ice
Yeah,
in Lake Placid when the Americans beat the Russians in the
yeah,
Olympics.
yeah.
There was a big divide on the team, on the U.S. team, which is then no NHL players were allowed to play in the Olympics. It was just college players.
Right,
But you had
right.
players from Boston, you had players from Michigan, and these were
Hmm.
the rivals. These guys hated each other, but they came
Hmm.
together. And there's a scene, and what happened is the coach would ask, "Who do you play for?" And the guys would say, "My name is Patrick Williams. I play for University of Michigan. My name is John Doe, and I play for Boston University." And he would keep asking until one day, Mike Eruzione, who was like the captain of this team, he said, "My name is Mike Eruzione, and I play for the United States of America." And that's when the
Hmm.
players got
Hmm.
it. You don't play for the name on the back; you play for the name on the front. So I think that's sort of the Yankees tradition.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think also if you're, I think a person, I think the tradition is if you're on the Yankees and you're a fan, you have an obligation to know the name without being spelled out for you. This guy's a Yankee. But now, I don't know the Yankees today anymore. I used to know the Yankees, but I don't know who's who anymore. I know a couple of players here and there, but I mamish don't know who's who. I used to be able to tell by the numbers. You know, Mickey Mantle was number 7, and Bobby
Listen,
Richardson was number 2.
the
Elston
the
Howard was number 32,
the
but
pain
I don't know
the
anymore.
the pain that Met fans endure is a special type of pain. I don't know how to describe it. It is
Yes, but
it's
there was 19 they were created in 1962, and in 1969 they came from behind, from being 9 games behind at the end of August, and they won the World Series. And that's why people that are more involved in celebrating things like the State of Israel, Yom Ha'atzmaut, and Yom Yerushalayim identify with the Mets, because the Mets had a victory. They grasped a victory from the jaws of defeat.
so you think
Uh,
it's like the champions of the underdog. That's why people are Met fans. They're underdog people.
I think so. I definitely think so. And like I said, the Yankees give people joy, and when people attach themselves, they when people from Europe, Jews came here from Europe, and they got acclimated to what's going on in America. Yankees were winners. Yankees were champions. They won champions. It was a great thing to attach yourself to. Anyway,
Okay, so
so
I wanna jump in. I wanna jump into a conversation over here. This is via Yeshiva World News. I want to jump into a conversation somebody wrote into their mailbag. You know, one day we're gonna have something on Daily Thread. We're gonna have our own type of mailbag. We're gonna have something that
okay.
people can leave voicemails and we'll play it. I've seen it done. It's really cool. We're gonna introduce it soon. But this is something that was written in, and I want to let's discuss this. The following letter was written by a prominent and well known balabus in Brooklyn. It's written for
Hmm.
Yeshiva World News following the recent debacle that hundreds of Rabbi and Memoras were informed via letter that summer vacations would be shortened and that the yeshivas would be starting earlier than it had been for the past 60 years. The letter was
Hmm.
released by Tori Masara and signed by the Vad Rosh Yeshiva.
Hmm.
And it starts like this. In the town of Brisk, where the great Reb Chaim Brisker presided as the Rav, there was an orphanage which served any child whose parents couldn't provide for. Many a time, Reb Chaim would open his front door only to find a small package wrapped in a towel or a sheet with a paper pinned to it, identifying it as an abandoned Jewish child. Reb Chaim would then hire a wet nurse to feed the baby until he could join the brisk orphanage. Once while Reb Chaim was sitting and learning, one of these nurses stormed into the house, irate. It had been a full week since she was last paid, and she had seen enough. Reb Chaim begged her to wait a few minutes, and within 15 minutes, he returned and handed her 3 coins, one for the past week and the other 2 compensate the upcoming 2 weeks. Mollified, the woman picked up the baby and left. As she was walking home, she noticed Reb Chaim chasing her, trying to get her attention. And when Reb Chaim caught up to her, he apologized profusely and begged her to refrain from feeding the baby for the next half hour. He explained to her that the nature is that when someone is angry, their milk becomes sour. This causes pain to the baby and leaves him unsatisfied. Reb Chaim said, I feel bad for the baby to suffer just because I was late in my payment. Hopefully, in a half hour, when your anger subsides, your milk will be sweet once again. This lesson has application for those who nourish our older children as well. When Talmidim are sitting in class with their Rebbe, they are drinking the sweet milk of Torah, which satiates and sustains them for life. So much care must be given that milk remains sweet and not come from a provider who feels misused or taken advantage of. It goes on to say that if the milk is sour, the Talmidim are not going to be satiated, and it's not going to be good for anybody at all. I think where give me a second. I think where this is going. That if you shorten the vacation time, the Rebbeim are not going to be happy, and therefore they're going to give sour milk to the Talmidim.
Yeah. So they want to shorten summer vacation. Schools want to start earlier than usual, but you're saying teachers, the Rebbeim are not going to be happy with that. Well, camp starts next week. You know that summer camp starts already next Thursday.
It's pretty early. It's pretty early.
Crazy early. It only means one thing now. It means it's going to end very, very early. The kids are not going to have what to do. So why shouldn't they be?
No, so the issue, right? So the issue is like, well, what does a parent do for 20 days in between camp and school?
Absolutely. Well,
so this letter ends off by saying every decision revolving around the job of the Rebbe, the responsibility of the Rebbe, or the schedule of the Rebbe must be executed mindful of the greater good of the Talmidim. One of the most important variables is the taste of the milk, which the children will drink. If the milk will be sour, then no matter how much classroom time is given to the child, he may end up with a stomach indigestion. The name was withheld from this. There are a lot of comments.
So it's broken down. It's broken down to when Yeshiva should start at the end of August.
I think it's just saying that I think the entire conversation here is that maybe there shouldn't be an organization that's saying when the yeshivas should start, but it should be discussed with the Rebbeim, because the Rebbeim ultimately are the ones that are going to have to. I don't know, but that's like a job. Any employee is subjected to whatever their employer says they have to do.
Yeah, but listen, teachers, generally speaking, take public school teachers in New York, for example. I don't know about other parts of the country. They work 8 months a year. I mean, they're off 4 months a year. They're off 2 months in the summer. They get off, during the holidays, New Year's, around that time. They get off spring break. They get off other times. And they basically work between 8 and 9 months. So what job do you know where you get 3 months? Let's say that's 12 weeks of paid vacation with all kinds of benefits.
I know, but being a Rebbe, being a teacher is an extremely it's a difficult job. To take care of kids all day and to teach all day.
So don't do it. Get another job. Drive for Uber.
So what you're saying is that if you're let's stick with the example here. If your milk is going to be sour, then maybe you shouldn't be a Rebbe.
Well, listen, if you're not going to do a good job, then if you're burnt out, for example, or you're in the classroom for 30 years and teaching 3rd grade or 5th grade or 7th grade, and you're just not excited about it anymore. So, it might be time to move on. There's younger generation of people coming out of yeshivas that would jump at the opportunity to be a Rebbe in yeshiva.
I know, but we still
and share enthusiasm with young kids.
We still have to show appreciation for the Rebbeim that have been in the industry for 30, 40 years. But I do hear you that if they are tired, if they are fed up, it's sort of what Sabora Grudko is saying about Shadchanim. Like, if you don't have time to get on the phone with me because you're so busy, then maybe don't do it. Like,
how was the response to that program?
No, it was great. It was great, and it's worth mentioning that this weekend's episode of Meaningful People coincides with the yard site tonight of Rabbi David Trank Zatzal. I
Hmm.
was in his house yesterday, and I interviewed his Rebbetzin Leah Trank, and we spoke for an hour and a half about the legacy, the life that Rabbi Trank lived. And this is like perfect what we're talking about. Rabbi Trank had never had the sour milk. Anything he
Yeah,
gave to his talmidim was 100% joy, happiness. That's what he had inside, and that's what he gave. And if he didn't have it, he wouldn't give it. But he was one of a kind.
very
It
unique.
was
He
something
was very
some
unique. Yeah.
something we touched upon is that the covet and the appreciation that Rabbi Train gets nowadays did not exist when he was in the trenches, when he was still a Rebbe,
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
which is interesting to note. I think that we have to always be mindful, maybe in Schluss Rabbi Trink, that the people, the heroes around you, to be machshav them while they're alive and be machshav them while they're here. He had to jump through hoops, and he fought, and he was a champion for the underdog. He fought for the kids that were kicked out of yeshivas. There was a Torah Masorah convention we mentioned in this episode that someone got up and asked a question about when could we kick a kid out of yeshiva, and he got up and he wasn't part of any panels. He wasn't part of
Yeah.
any of these mechacham
Yeah.
panels, and he
Yeah.
got up and he started yelling on top of his lungs. He said, "We're asking when are we kicking kids out of yeshiva? Why are we asking a question like this? We need to be asking when are we going to bring kids into yeshiva? Stop asking about when we're going to kick kids out of yeshiva." And the answer that Revelia Svei gave on the dais said, we don't argue with Rabbi David Trank.
Hmm.
That was
Wow.
that was the answer he gave. And there's stories of Rabbi Trank that by Aguda conventions or Torah Masorah conventions they would say, "Oh, Talmidim of Rabbi Elephant meet in the dining room. Talmidim of Rabbi Shmuel Kamenetsky you could meet in the lobby. Talmidim of Rabbi Svei you meet in the back lobby." And Rabbi Trank would get up on the table and he'd say, "Talmidim of Rabbi Trank we meet in the kitchen."
Yeah.
That was his thing. That's who
Yeah.
he was. And this weekend we have an episode all about Rabbi David Trank on his fourth yard site. So people
Wow.
could tune into
4 years
that.
already. Wow.
Yes, yes, and
So
and
how
that
was the
is
how was the reaction to Flora Gradco's podcast? I mean, you must
it was very
came
yeah.
across very impressive, very articulate, very impressive, very interesting. She must be getting a lot of shidduch offers through your offices.
I didn't ask. It could be. That wasn't the purpose of the interview. I think the purpose of the interview is to bring sensitivity to the issue,
No, but
and I think
it could be a byproduct. It could be a byproduct of the. It wasn't
definitely.
the focus of it.
Listen, it'd be very nice if that's the case. It'll be very nice if that's the case. But I think that it's an important conversation, one which we didn't finish the conversation. We just started the conversation. It needs to continue to be had um, about being sensitive to people, about
Right.
seeing people for who they are and not what their status is if they're single,
Hmm.
married. And if you didn't listen to that episode yet, you can still listen to it. It's up on YouTube. It's on Apple, Spotify along with this
Great.
episode of Daily Thread. So make sure to tune in next week to a new episode of Daily Thread. Make sure to hit the link in the description in the show notes of this episode and subscribe to the Daily Thread on WhatsApp status.